Greetings, Simon Rainier, thanks Simon Sauter. This is my lovely assistant Griffin. So, let's talk attacking, specifically attacking with the longsword. When we look at Fiore's text, it's all organized in a very specific way. First he shows you 6 ways of how to hold the sword, of which we've basically gone over one of them. Secondly, he shows you how to attack with the sword. After that, he finally shows you the guard positions. Guard positions are really great defensively, but in order to properly use them, we have to learn how to properly attack, or at least the other guy does. And since we're all learning together, let's cover that. There are 6 cuts. There are 5 thrusts. Normally how it's divided up, it's you have the cuts and then the thrust. So 6 cuts and the thrusts. 7's a little easier to keep track of than 11. But we'll cover everything today, just because that's the way we do things. So, cutting with the longsword. The first thing to say is when we first pick up a sword and start cutting around with it, it's very, very tempting to make a big arcing motion with our hands. This is, not to put too fine a point on it, wrong. It does 2 things when we do that. First off, doesn't allow us to properly use our body to generate power. Secondly, provides a much easier time for our opponent to defend against us. We don't want either of those things. So, because everything is the same, be it the unarmed, the dagger, and the sword, we attack the same way irregardless. Our lead hand, the hand we're leading with, in my case my right hand, extends straight out from the shoulder. We don't throw a punch by coming across and not down. Generally speaking, we throw it straight out. Same when we are using our grappling positions, we push out straight from the shoulder. Exactly the same thing when we start bringing in the dagger. It's common to see big downward stabbing motions. It's harder to defend against if we come straight out from the shoulder. These have their place, but for when we're coming from a low position especially, we bring the dagger up and shoot it straight out into the other person. We can still get the nice angle into the clavicle and other juicy targets. This just gives us that little cover, makes it a little harder to defend. So, picking up the sword, the first cut we have is the fendente. We have the fendente, the second cut is the reverso fendente. They are not straight up and down, and not at a 45-degree angle. They are almost straight up and down. The path of the cut should enter the opponent's body roughly around eye level, cutting through as much meat as is possible and leaving just above the knee. Obviously, no sword is sharp enough to be able to do that in a single swing, but that's the path that we cut. So, similarly, we don't do that angle. If we come at a 45-degree angle, we're not letting ourselves cut through as much target. If we come straight up and down, this doesn't work for us for a number of reasons. First off, we have a skull. If we're cutting directly down onto the skull, we're allowing the skull to do what it's supposed to do and protect our brain. Secondly, helmets are a thing. Medieval times, oftentimes, the helmets were cone-shaped, at least a little bit. And I've actually done some cool tests with this, where if you come in straight down with a blow to the top of the head, it generally deflects it clear of the shoulder, keeping you totally safe on the defensive side, and also leaving your opponent open to attack. So, coming in at this angle allows us to target the smaller bones, the ears, the eyes, the juicy bits in the cheek, without relying on trying to cleave through that big thick bone on the top of our head. So, when we cut, I'm going to get sideways to you. We start, drawn, hand comes straight out from the shoulder, delivering that cut downwards. Great way to practice this is in front of a mirror, if you have one. If you don't, get one, or just figure it out. Cuts down, eye to knee level. Again, As previously mentioned, the cut stops at the same time as the foot stops, whether it's cutting all the way through or delivering a half cut where we're leaving ourselves in an extended position. The reverse of that, the reverso fendente, comes in from simply the other shoulder. Again, whichever side of the body our sword is on, that's our rear leg. Step forward as we cut. We use our legs and our hips to deliver a little extra power for this. One of the great ways to practice this is start with the sword in a single hand. You push it out, comes for the cut. Push it out, comes for the cut. The rear hand aims the blade a little more precisely. Also kind of pulls in. It's not really a levering push-pull action, but that's a good way of thinking about it, especially to start. So there's our first two cuts. Next up, we have the rising cuts, the sottani cuts. These ones are a little trickier tactically. Whereas the fendente is a great opening cut, the rising cuts, less so. They are rather easy to defend against and don't generally target critical areas when we're just trying to hit someone. They follow the same path as the cuts, coming down. They just start low and work their way up. One of the best ways to use this cut is, especially with the false edge, the edge, if you hold the sword up, it's facing back towards you, deflect an oncoming blow and then deliver a cut to the other person. It can be done on either side. You can also use the true edge to meet, bind the opponent's blade down. Once again, we have an airplane. I actually waited this time until a plane flew past to try to time it so we wouldn't get it, but apparently that failed. So, hey, that's the name of the game. I am positively cursed with this. So, we have rising cuts. Can be done with either the true edge, facing away from us if we just hold the sword, or the false edge from either side. Next we have the mezzani cuts across the middle. These, generally speaking, are done with the true edge coming from the right hand side, false edge coming from the left hand side. Even though it's written thus in Fiore's treatise, I tend to find this is not a written stone rule. There are situations where I do mix that up a bit, but I'm mentioning it that it's in the book in case there's some sort of interpretation I'm missing. Always entirely possible. Those cuts can be done anywhere from the top of the head roughly to knee level, as per the book. Generally speaking, where I like to aim these cuts is right across the throat. Good place to aim them. So, going through, once again, we have fendente, reverso fendente, sottano, reverso sottano, mezzana, reverso mezzana. So, cool, yeah? Next, we have the 5 thrusts. Simply put, we can either come straight in from the middle, from the low to the right, from the low to the left, high to the right, high to the left. Not going to belabor that too much. Thrusts, however, I will say are incredibly effective. The most dangerous part of any sword, be it a training sword or an actual sharpened sword, is the tip. It requires almost no pressure to put the tip of your sword through a target. We were doing some live cutting a little while ago, and we had these little tiny, sort of your standard water bottle size. Cutting through them was extremely difficult. You had to hit just right to make the sword slice through it without knocking the bottle flying. It's a combination of a hard surface and a light target. Thrusts, however, went right through, the bottles didn't even wobble. So, thrusts are incredibly deadly. There's been an age-old debate, literally has been going on for hundreds of years, about which is more effective in a fight, the cut or the thrust. I'm not expecting anyone to ever have a solid answer, but in George Silver, he states that a cut is more likely to be debilitating. You slice muscles, the other person can't fight. A thrust is more likely to be deadly. both have their place. So, quick review. We have our 6 cuts. We have our 5 thrusts. And that is how the basics of how to attack with the Italian medieval longsword. To practice this, highly recommend just picking up a sword and starting to do it. Start slow and build up speed. So, down, down, la, ta, ta, however so you decide to do it. And it's always important when you do this, take a second as you're cutting, check your stance, check your